Hi, it's Bentley's mom, Mrs. Ballas again. Okay, so I'm going to go over the lesson for tonight, the homework problems that Bentley wanted me to do. That thought were the best. So numbers 3, 5, 6, 9, and 11. This is from chapter 10, lesson 1, from page 743. So let's do number 3. The directions say find the volume. It gives you a picture, and the measurements. So the formula for volume is length times width times height. We're looking for the volume. And they give us the length and width and the height, which are from the picture. And again, the order doesn't matter. So we have 6 times 4 3/4 times 6 again. Okay? So what we're going to do is change this to an improper. So we have 6 times 4 times 4 is 16, plus 3 is 19, and then times 6. I'm just going to put those over 1. And then, again, you can cancel anything on top with anything on bottom. We'll make this look a little better. Okay, so 2, you can either do this 4 with this 6 or this 4 with this 6. 2 goes into both 4 and 6. So 2 goes into 4 twice, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. And then you can also do this 2 with this 6. You can keep going until everything's simplified. So 2 goes into 2 once, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. As long as one's on top and one's on bottom, you can do that and keep going. Okay, now we're left with 3 times, it's kind of messy, that's okay, 3 times 19 times 3, and I'm going to put that on my calculator, and which is 171 over 1. And if, so this is the work I like to see as a middle school teacher. But if your teacher wants you to actually write out 3 times 19 times 3 by hand and do the long multiplication problem, that's what you can do. But otherwise, this is the work I'm looking for. And then it's just 171. It's volume, so we're going to write inches cubed. Okay, and then I always box my final answer. Okay, so that's for number 3. Okay, the next one is number 5. Okay, so we did this one. So now we're going to do number 5. Now number 5 says find the length of a rectangle prism. It has a volume of 2,830.5, and they gave us the width, which is 18.5, and the height, which is 9, and what we need to find is the length. So we don't know what the length is. That's our missing one. So we're going to write the formula, which is volume equals length times width times height. So for volume, I'm going to plug in 2,830.5 and then equals. For length, I don't know. I'm going to leave it as the L. For width, I'm going to plug in 18.5. And then for height, I'm going to do the 9. Okay? And you can also use parentheses instead of the dot for multiplication. That works too. So what you're going to do first is you're going to simplify it on this side of the equation. So I'm going to do 18.5 times 9. I'm going to put that in my calculator. And I get 166, so I still have this L, times 166.5. And the rule of thumb is if you're given decimals, answer in decimals and do it in decimals. If you're given fractions, then your final answer should be in a fraction. So, but if you're given a decimal, you can switch it to that form. Okay, now to get L by itself, I need to get rid of this number right here. This is multiplication, so I do the opposite or inverse operation, which is division. So I'm going to divide this, and this is how you write it, by this number 166.5. Whatever you do to this side of the equal sign, you have to do to this side. So I'm going to divide this by 166.5. That cancels because it's just 1. Anything divided by itself is 1. So I'm left with the L, and then I'm going to put this in my calculator. How do you put a fraction bar in your calculator? It's just the division sign. So I'm going to put 2,830.5 divided by 166.5. Then I hit equals, and I get 17. Now this is length, so I'm going to go back to my problem. And it's in meters, so it's just meters. Remember, volumes would be meters cubed. Okay? There's your answer. Your work should look something like that. Okay? And it is kind of messy. That's how it should look. There's a lot of work to show. And that's with using the calculator, okay? So even though you're using a calculator, it doesn't mean you don't have to show your work. You still have to write down all of that. Okay, the next one is number 6. Okay, and here we're given the volume to 60. We're given, we don't know the length, and we're given the width and the height. So the width's 2.5 and our height is 4. So this is the same, similar to the one I just did. So I'm first going to write the formula, which is length times width times height. I would memorize that. That one comes up all the time. It's volume for a rectangular prism. So for the V, I'm going to put in 60. Okay, wherever I see a V, I put in 60. I don't know what L is, so I'm just going to leave the L. The width is 2.5, and the height is 4. Okay, so I plugged into the W, the H, and the V. Now I'm going to do this. So I do 2.5 times 4, okay, and that gives me 10. And then we still have the times L equals 60. Now, to get L by itself, after I multiplied that, I need to get rid of this 10. This is multiplication, so I do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. And I'm going to divide this side by whatever that number is. And then whatever I do to this side, I do to this side. That cancels, and I'm left with 60 divided by 10, which is 6. And the length is this in inches, I believe. Yep, so it's just going to be 6 inches. Okay, and I boxed my final answer, just like that. Okay, so that was number 6 from the homework. Then number 9, let's see, 9 says, the glass container shown is filled to a height of, so the height, it's filled to a height of 2.25, and then how much sand is currently in the container. Okay, so even though the height on the picture, it goes up to 3, it's not filled up all the way. It's only filled up to this height. So we're going to use the height that's filled up to, which is this, and then the length is 5, and then the width is 4.5. Now, because we have a decimal here and a fraction here, you can choose to do them both in fractions or in decimals. Because 4.5 I know is 4.5, I'm going to change that to a decimal. Now, the only reason I'm allowed to change that to a decimal is because this one was a decimal. But if there were no decimals in the problem, you would keep them all as fractions. Okay, so I'm going to plug this in to find the volume. Length times width times height. Okay, so we have length, which is 5, times width, which is 4.5, times the height, which is 2.25. Okay, and I'm going to put this in my calculator. 5 times 4.5 times 2.25, and I get 50.625. Okay, this is the exact answer, and it's going to be in units. It's inches cubed. I don't think it said round, but if it did say round, if it said like round to the nearest 10th or 100th, that would be 50.63. I'm just going to leave it like this. If it doesn't say round, usually you don't round. Okay, that's A. Okay, so my answer to A, I'll leave it up here, is 50.625 inches cubed. Okay, that's the volume of how much the sand is filled. Now on B, it says how much more sand could the container hold before it overflows? Okay, so let's find the volume of the whole container if we filled it to the very top. So in this case, the volume is going to be, look at the drawing, it's going to be 5 times 4.5 times 3. So I'm going to put that in my calculator, 5 times 4.5 times 3, and I get 67.5 inches cubed. Okay, now this is the volume if you filled it all the way to the top, but the question said how much more would it be? So we're going to subtract those two, because this is the amount filled to the very top. This is how much was actually in it. So I'm just going to subtract the two to see how much more I could put in it. So we do 67.5 minus 50.625, and I get 16.875. So 16.875 inches cubed, and that's how much more we could put in without it overflowing. And then C says what percent of the container is filled with sand. So for percent, so B is 16.875 inches cubed. Okay, so, and then that's how much more, but let's keep this number 67.5 important. So you always put the total on the bottom. So how much it's filled with the sand, we're going to put on the top. And for percent, you always put the total on the bottom. So how much it's filled is it's filled up to 50.625. And we're going to put that over the total that it can hold, which is 67.5. And how do I put this in on my calculator? That's the division sign. So I do 50.625. I'm going to divide that by 67.5, and I get 0.75. Now that's the decimal. So to change decimals into percent, you have to move the decimal 2 places to the right, which is 75%. So that's the answer to C. Okay, that was a long problem. 3 steps. It's like 3 separate problems. Okay, last one is number 11. So we did 9. 9 had 3 parts, and now we're going to do 11. So 11 is just helping you to understand. I won't do it exactly, but I'm going to help you just understand in general. Here's a cube that they give you. And if you count the little squares, it looks like this is 3, this is 3, this is 3. They're all the same. Okay, so what we need to understand is the difference between the length of a side. So the side is equal to 3. Okay, and we need to understand how it changes for area and then how it changes for volume. For area, you take whatever that is and you square it. Okay, so that actually becomes 9. For volume, you cube it. Okay, so remember it's not 3 times 3, it's cubed, which is 3 times itself times itself. So 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27. Okay, so this kind of gives you a gist of how to do number 11. So whatever the side is, let's say the side is X, could be 5, could be 10, could be anything. That's just the length. The area is always going to be squared, and the volume is always going to be cubed. Okay, and just don't mix up. Squaring something is not the same as timesing it by 2. Like 5 times 2 is 10, but 5 squared is 25. So make sure you know that it's area squared, volumes cubed. Okay, and that's it. Thanks.